Joining us for this roundtable by Planet Underground, hosted in Las Vegas at CGA's Fall Summit. Special thanks to those joining on a live stream. If you have any questions on a live stream, please submit it, and the team here will try to get it into the session. And audience members, if you have any questions, please feel free to walk up to the microphone here. I'm Jimmy Wang with the Creative Partners. I'm going to have our panelists quickly introduce themselves, their company, and what they do there. Let's start with, on my left here, with Shane.
Yeah, my name's Shane Hart. I'm with Utility Ticket Management Software.
And my name is Brian Peters. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Korterra, and we're a ticket management system for municipalities, contract locators, and facility owners.
I am Matt Dragon, and I'm with Screening Eagle Technologies. We're a manufacturer of GPR equipment.
Thomas Young with SeeScan, Senior Director of Sales and Business Development.
Great, thank you. So the topic for this roundtable is data analytics and data sharing. I'm going to start throwing a question out, and then you all feel free to jump in and continue to discuss it. So the question is, beyond CGA's DPI, Dirt Report, and other offerings, how else can the industry leverage data analytics, and data sharing to improve damage prevention?
Well, I think one of the moves the CGA has done recently with the Damage Prevention Institute at making, a bit of a damage investigation allows for us to cover like a basis of people that might not have something. So when you create something kind of like an open source or available, because we want to make open access to that data, one of the big keys for us right now, and I think what that move did, which is important for us, is access to the data and easiness to kind of capture it so that we can all kind of collect it together for us to make, wide stakeholder decisions with.
Where do you house it? Where's the data? What standards do we have for the data?
It's in the cloud.
It's in the cloud.
It's all in the cloud,
Yeah.
for sure, right? And
There's so many questions with this topic.
yeah, but it's not that, because there's lines on it. Like at some point I own this here, and it's like I have my data here housed. I always store it. Like I see this a lot of times with people with Esri right now. They don't understand what a REST API is, and they're like, we can't set that up. And they would give you all their stale data and have you locally embed it over giving you a connection that when someone's accessing that data, you have credentials, you have tokens, you have timestamps, you have logs. So sometimes about that, like there really is lines in the sand about, this is my data. Do I lease access to this data? And people can pull it instead of pushing it all around everywhere, because you can get too much where it's all everywhere too, and no one knows what to do with anything, right?
I was going to say that you got to ask, what is the data, right? So are we talking like geospatially locating underground assets all over the place? And, that data obviously is really important because you could go out, you could locate once and mark something forever, essentially, if you can go back out and relocate that asset. So I think it's really where the industry is trending, and some of the challenges that are out there, like headcount, late tickets. How are we going to leverage all this data?
Yeah, I think you're onto something there too. And I have a similar thought that if you send a locator out in the field with a map, an accurate map, he has it's much faster. It's much more complete. He's able to do the markouts and everything, I think, in a more complete way. And that'll grow if you had a way to capture that data while people were locating. I think that's a great advantage to the industry. I also, as a part of that, think updating the data within the one-call centers is very important, because then that becomes the catalyst, that becomes the driver. You're sending that person back out with a map. And certain states are starting to look at that as a model. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that, other industries have solved this. When you look at the medical space, there's electronic medical records being shared across a number of different applications. And if we can find a way to find where those areas of opportunity where there is, to your point, comfortability with those data sets, how can we as a as a consortium, normalize that data. You know, when I look at data that can come from the GPS devices and the locate device in the field, largely we can normalize that data across the industry, and there can be ways in which we do that. So I think that first we have to find a common ground, and then we really have to look towards those industries that have solved this. Commerce has solved this. Distribution has solved this. Manufacturing has largely solved this, and so has the medical space. So if we can find those opportunities and come together and find those data points that are most meaningful and normalize around them, we stand a chance to speak the same language, right? When we talk about late tickets, when we talk about on-time performance, right? Those are different across different states and different call centers. So how do we come together to find a common ground around those definitions, and then look to see how we can bring that information together? And then along with that, you know, talking about and I'm really happy you guys are here, because I think that the adoption of advanced technologies in the hardware space, and really putting that technology in the hands of the locators and the individuals out in the field and being able to share that information, I think is going to be the key to unlocking a large amount of efficiencies across this industry. And it's on us to start to adopt those technologies.
Well, we see a lot of that stuff now. Like it's not like this is just sort of an overnight thing, right? So like when you look at some of those other spaces, the medical field is quite advanced. Even some of their X-ray technologies are stuff we would love to have here in the locate industry, same as the airlines, right? Like some of those scanning equipments and stuff is, you know, leading edge. There's lots of investment in those industries here. And we're starting to see more investment in here. And I know when we talk about data, we always talk about the GPS point and stuff. But there's so much data out in this process. For someone like, you could have a camera that watches a site, and it will tell you everything about there. You have an AI watching a site, but we can't feasibly do that in this industry. And so we're trying to do that with all these other little bits of data. And you might use the data to be like, has this area been touched since the last locate? How do I know something wasn't installed in that area? So it's not just this GPS data. It's a lot of this data and about what's happening in that ground area, right? And you have things like, you know, that can identify using satellite imagery additional risks. You have data where it might take a picture and it's health and safety. And all these things not just keep, you know, the utilities safe, but are keeping the workers safe as we try to build a better experience here for everyone. Even the maps, we see that the maps with some of the call centers where there's a bit of a gap where like you make a call request, you don't get anything back for 2 days. And then we've got some call centers that are trying to issue a map in the meantime, so that it just gives them a little bit more of information. It's like a collaboration. Like if I was doing a project, I wouldn't be like the people I'm collaborating with, hey, wait 2 days, we're going to keep you in that black box over there, and then we'll let you in. And this kind of what happens there. And as we see, we make this data more accessible, close these gaps. There are some things that we're doing here, you know, that are starting to tie some of those things together. It's a long battle, and our industry has a little bit of legacy issues. I would say a little bit, I mean a lot of it. And there's so many stakeholders. We want to be able to bring everyone up. So it's just it's a little bit slow.
Talking about stakeholders, Brian said other industries have solved this. And is the elephant in the room the point that there's only one stakeholder that pays into this 811 system, right? The facility owners, the operators, telcos. And the data is mostly theirs, is almost all theirs or collected by their vendors, like the locators. So, it's just a practical question, right? Do they really want this solved? Or what are the barriers to their wanting it solved? Like, because if they wanted it solved, it doesn't matter what you guys think. I'm just being honest, right? It's going to be solved.
One of the things that I see that comes up is, and I've heard this question before, can we get to a point where someone puts in a ticket and then they get, you know, something back that says, here's the map, you know, avoid those objects there. And I don't think, I think it's going to be a long time before we get there, because I think the accuracy of the maps, the data itself, you know, you talk about other data, the metadata and everything underneath it. We have to consume, you know, we have to digest that, right? We have to get to a place where we can all get on the same language, kind of what you were talking about, normalization of that. I do believe that it's going to be tough to overcome the laws which state now that you have to go out and mark. And so that's going to be, we need to get to some competency, I think, and get running and get some trials going. I know they're doing some stuff in Minnesota. You look at, things that are going on in California, Colorado. I think we get some of that, and then we can start building some models and reacting that way. But to the other point of, the locators, who's a locator? If someone puts something in the ground and he's working for a company and that's their job to put it in, in California, we have a new law that states you have to put that in a GIS. Well, but does it have to be a locator? Can it be someone who can look down in the pipe and then follow it and trace that thing? And then put it into a data set and use that information going forward. I think those are all little pieces to this whole picture.
So the frustrating part of this is that all the technology exists, right?
Yeah.
It all exists. You can go out and you can do a locate with a pipe locator. You can do it with GPR.
Or visually,
Should be
you can
both,
stand over it.
right? But that locate should happen like once, right? And it shouldn't be rushed, and it should be really thorough. And then they go out and they capture these digital points and other data, metadata, that you can QA, QC after the fact. And then once it's done, it's tracked. Like there's an expiration date to that, right? So in the future, if there is somebody that had a ticket in that area, that's a digital map that gets sent out. And somebody goes out with a GNSS receiver and they mark it out. They're not doing a locate, they're doing a mark out, right? So you would think that would be far more efficient and, save money in the long run and also increase safety, right? So I do know that the more you share all of these digital points and other data sets, the safer that job site is. So the guy that's, on the shovel, that's supposedly like watching the backhoe bucket just in case you hit something. Well, yeah, we hit something after the fact, right? So that guy looks at his phone and he says, this afternoon we're going to be over there and I think there's a gas line over there. Hey, Joe, there's a gas line over there, right? So everything sort of changes, right? And safety goes up, damages go down, and, you think there's cost savings there ultimately. Yeah. But what's frustrating, again, is the technology exists. It has to be monetized so people are motivated to do it.
I did have someone the other day that was a telecom, and that was like, they were kind of a newer telecom, and that was the realization they were coming to is that, okay, all I'm kind of required to do is I got to put paint on the ground. That's the only reason I'm visiting the sites out there, right? And so a lot of times, like, industry is changing, like, I've seen how long has people talked about the AR, where you can have glasses on and this stuff exists. It just takes time to get all this data out here. We don't know, do we want paint everywhere? It's like, it's hard when there's 50 states and we all got to kind of choose together. And I mentioned the CGA thing, from the damage data, right? At some point, everyone that does work will have their own data. And they can either choose to contribute that to, or sell it to someone else. And that'll be every time someone's doing work, they should be collecting data. Even the excavators, I am dealing with some excavation companies that they want to have a GIS platform. And at some point, like the GIS data and mapping data is just another element to how we view the things that we look at and work in, right?
I do want to just state one thing, though, is that saying that just the facility owners are the stakeholder, I think is disingenuous to this entire industry. We are all stakeholders in this. The public is a stakeholder in this. This is why this industry exists, because the public is fundamentally needs to be protected from issues affecting this infrastructure. So how can we as an organization help to promote these technologies? Like what are we doing as part of infrastructure bills to say, hey, this technology exists out there. How can we incentivize these facility owners, these contract locators to adopt this technology in a way that makes it more meaningful? This output is more meaningful to the public. Think about all that goes into when there's a delayed locate. There's not just the delay and the potential damage, there's a delay in the construction. There's a delay in the throughput of that organization to be able to complete that task. So the usage of this technology extends far beyond just damage prevention. It will also help to expedite these construction activities that are taking place across the United States. And so again, just focusing on saying the locator and the excavator as the stakeholder is incredibly disingenuous. We are all stakeholders in this. The public is a stakeholder in this. These lines, these infrastructures go through the public easements in a lot of areas, right? So we have a vested interest in understanding what infrastructure exists within these areas. We have a fundamental interest in understanding the safety of our communities as it relates to these elements. So we really have to find a way as an industry and as an organization to help promote these technologies and how we can implement them to create more efficient locates. But then that's going to pay dividends for construction as well, because these locates will be more efficient. They'll be done more in a timely manner, and they'll reduce damages and delays that are associated with those damages.
And planning and design. I mean, having knowledge of what's
Yep.
there is it's a leg up. It's a way to get your project going, faster, have greater understanding of the area. We hear stories about people saying, oh, well, they just call 811 and then they want to see what's underground so then they can plot their line of where they're going to, run their horizontal directional drill. And
That's like Chicago, right? Like they have done a really good job because they have like a body that looks at it to say, hey, is that how we build things in Chicago? And then kind of send it back to the drawing board. And it's that, whether it's at the excavation side or the other side, anytime you can get earlier in a process to make better choices, same as software, right? You're not going to just get in there and start writing code. You're going to have a prototype. You're going to have it mapped out. You're going to have flow charts. You're going to have a couple meetings and use cases, so you can get that really good feedback. And I know this topic is data, and so I want to kind of put this out there is that really the data and the kind of the analytics is how we choose the next technologies. Right. So we use the data and analytics to say, hey, look at what's happening here. We're doing some things here. And sometimes the processes are just the processes that you choose to have in place. Like sometimes a call center might have 20 options for a locator and you save time because look, our company only uses these 5. And if you can't get the locate done, someone in the office will choose what we're sending back to the call center and stuff like that.
Talking about data analytics that Shane started, by the way, just to clarify, I didn't say the facility owners are the only stakeholders. They're only stakeholders that pay into the system.
I actually don't know if I've ever heard that. I know.
Just to be clear.
No one said that.
So here's the question. Following up on Shane's, data analytics. Do we demand perfection from data and analytics while accepting imperfection from humans? So here's what I mean. And that may inhibit progress and adoption of technology. Here's what I mean. Waymo just analyzed their safety, right? So they drove 7.1 million miles in 3 cities. And what they found is that their vehicles are 85% less likely to be involved in an accident resulting in injury than human drivers. So for every 6 human driver accidents involving an injury, Waymo has 1. But society is still, when there is an accident involving Waymo or someone else, another autonomous driving vehicle, it's on the front page of New York Times, Wall Street Journal, whatever. But meanwhile, human drivers kill about 50,000 other humans a year. Does that mentality slow adoption of technology in this space and others, but let's leave others aside, because we're expecting perfection from data and analytics while, accept imperfection from humans?
And what do you mean by imperfection as far as data collection?
No, human
as far as
locators.
the marked out versus
just whatever humans do. Yeah, it's
Like
good
you take a
enough.
chance. Like at some point, if the computers know better and the robots know better, when do you start trusting them?
But it's not perfect yet.
more?
That's
It's not perfect yet, and it's like that's the idea with, and this becomes, I always look at this problem as like, I don't want to get in there yet because I almost like to have a little bit of a chance. It's like that total randomization is kind of what scares me. If I'm driving the car, I think maybe, I've been driving for a lot of years, clean record. And now for myself, if I take the autonomous car, I'm jumping into a pool of stats where like now 1 in 6, maybe I feel like me was 1 in 12. because us as a whole, as a human society, we have lots of variance out there. And what that does, that'll bring the variance, the floor up when you bring that autonomy. But if some people still, it's not exactly the same. Like if I think I'm a really good driver, I still might trust me a little bit there. You remove the randomness of me being that 1 in 6. So that's a big hold here because people want to be perfect. Everyone wants to go home at night. That is a bit of our industry that we have here. Everyone wants to go home at night. We're trying to get to 0 damages, but really reducing them is probably a more meaningful step, right? And I think we are, like I said, have some legacy things here that make us really slow to adopt. And that's why we need the insights and the case studies and to say, this is what's happening here. This is the data we're finding here. Things like the DPI Institute too, being able to bring that stuff together, right? So I don't know, what do you guys feel about that? Like, are you getting an autonomous car, or would
Well,
you
I
trust
also
an
think
autonomous excavator?
in this industry, we often talk about change is glacial, right? And that there's a lot of liability, there's a lot of costs involved. Matt talked a little bit about that, and you have to kind of solve all of that. It has to be, in my opinion, it has to be kind of market driven. Well, look at the advancements we can do. It's only this much money to get this. Now I can go ahead and, map everything out accurately. We talk about, you said that, we can do it. We can, but a typical locator can't. The connection between the GNSS device, the tablet, the software manipulating all of that sometimes gets overwhelming.
That's why you have, maybe you have a couple of levels, right? Maybe you have a locator, and then you have a guy that marks out, right? And the guy that marks out just takes the digital file with a GNSS receiver and marks everything out, right? And he follows the digital file. But the locator is kind of a different entity where they're, a master at what they do. And, you go that route. I think there are pressures that are going to force the industry this direction. Like, do you have a lot of people that are coming out of like a 2-year, education system saying, I want to go out and be a locator, right? That's the problem, right?
How do you make it a career?
How do you fill all those slots for people? And as infrastructure gets bigger and bigger and
more
regulation, more complex, you've got to have qualified people to do that. And the qualified people are running out. So you've got to start to rely on technology to sort of bridge that gap. And
I just think we talked about that a little bit earlier. We're looking for extremely qualified people just to go paint the ground out there. It's tough. It's not a great career. It's not long lasting unless you can move up, get to that advanced stuff where you're either doing a little bit of SUE, more data stuff, more capturing stuff. I mean, both of you guys sell the equipment and stuff, right? Like, how do we still have municipalities and some people without the data tracking their mapping? Like, there's still some paper maps and whiteout out there.
Well, but
it's shocking.
we have the equipment, at this point in time, technology will go up to another level. But at this point in time, you have the ability to capture those points, but does someone want to pay for it? They want to pay either in time or, all these other things. And that's where I think it's a tough, we talk about also, he mentioned stakeholders. Some stakeholders or some, operators out there don't want you to know where their stuff is, or they don't want their competition to know where their stuff is. Or they may be hesitant to send out a truck to show where their stuff is. So it's all of these things together.
They're going to have to try to get over that.
Yeah.
Well, the amount of ROI that comes from knowing where your stuff is, whether it's like just shutting off a service valve or things you got to do, right? Like we said, hey, data, there's GPS points, but there's so much more going on. And like you still have some big cities in, say, the state of Texas that aren't part of the call center stuff. So you already get some fragmentation where, like we need drivers in here. We need incentives to bring people to this table to be a part of it. And there needs to be benefits. And the excavators, if you made them pay, would they just dig and take the risk? I don't know, right? And we don't really want to test those things out like that. But there's some things here that are just like some incentive aligning that could be really help speed up some of the adoption.
If I was in an excavator and somebody said, "Hey, you've got 100 yards, you have to dig here, trench," right? But there's nothing there. We're absolutely 99.9% certain there's nothing there. right? That guy is just going to do what he does, and he is going to dig, and it's going to be efficient, and it's going to be a day, right? But if you told that guy, we think that there isn't anything in there, just be careful, right? How long do you think that's going to take? So, there are efficiencies that are just going to happen if you know where your infrastructure is.
Or tickets. Look at the millions of tickets this country has. If you, like you said, if you went to a spot and said, I know there's nothing there, and then I could clear that ticket electronically and say, the operator could say, I know that there's nothing there with confidence. Then that ticket, someone doesn't have to roll a truck, someone doesn't have to go out and market.
Huge.
Efficiencies.
Well, it'd be even like for the excavator there, some excavators might be really awesome at maintaining the marks. Take pictures, take measurements, offsets, and do that. And this is just an example. Sometimes like a state will say, well, it's only valid for 12 days after when it was called in initially. But I see some other places that might be like 60, 90 days validity, right? Because you might actually that's keeping stuff really good. I've maintained my marks. We were a little bit delayed in kind of digging, but now we're ready to go. And now I just lost this validity. I got to go through this whole thing again. And there's tons of these little situations that happen everywhere.
So to your question, going back to that, I think what I find interesting about the analogy put forward here is that the incidents that occur are really based upon individual decisions, right? So when there is an accident, it's generally there's a fault, there's individual, there's there's an issue with cognition around like what took place. In the case of the autonomous vehicles and that component, it's a systematic thing, right? So it's that defect that exists that caused that accident is conceivably in all the other elements of that system, right? To where now you see this issue to where you have to solve it because it could be it's a flaw in the logic of that system and in that algorithm, right? And so that's what can give people pause is that now instead of this being an acutely individual issue, now it's a systematic issue, right? And what I can explain away somebody having an accident because they looked at their phone, right? It's much more difficult when the vehicle doesn't have a phone and its decisions are based upon abstract algorithms and logic, right? And so we as a public have to grow comfortable in saying we're going to accept that risk. We're going to accept that that sort of that cloth in front of us a lot, saying, okay, well, we know you're going to fix that, right, manufacturer? That's a very different conversation than saying to somebody, here's a fine for looking at your cell phone, right? So when we look at automation and when we look at new technologies, there does have to be a large degree of comfortability, but organizations also have to be open and mindful of their responsibility to be able to explain what occurred, why it occurred, and what steps they're taking to remove that possibility from occurring. That's very different than an individual accident, right? When you get into these automated systems, right? So, we will all have to accept that our robot overlords are coming to take over for us and automate many parts of our lives here, right? So it's just the way that technology is going. But again, organizations have to be mindful of that response that we have as humans when we relieve ourselves of those decision making, right? And now it becomes a systematic decision as opposed to an individual one.
Thank you. Last question. So a lot of people think about locating as putting paint on the ground, but isn't locating just communicating by one party, the locator, to the other party, the excavator, where the facilities are underground?
With a confidence level.
Right. Right. So in 2024, is sending a human out to every one of these sites, or sometimes multiple humans, multiple trucks, to put paint on the ground, the only or even best way to communicate that?
No,
No.
it's not. I think we have to be willing to accept a multitude of different mediums in which we can communicate that. And we have to accept that different organizations are going to have different needs. The general homeowner is probably going to need the marks on the ground. Like, I wouldn't expect my grandparents to be able to read a digital map and understand where they can put their cherry tree that they want to plant. but I would fully expect that a professionally licensed excavator can read a map and make a determination as to where they need to dig, right? So there's going to be variances based upon the organizations that are submitting these tickets. And the reality is for us is that we can't continue to perform locates with the volume increases that we are seeing and the resources that are made available to us. We have to look at different opportunities using GPS-enabled devices, using better as-found layers to be able to bring those into the GIS infrastructure so that we can provide these organizations different means with which they'll be able to identify where these assets are.
But I think your grandfather could look out on his driveway and see that the red line that hugs the driveway is an
100%.
electric line.
Right.
I mean, he may not know that red is electric, but you could just
Yeah.
say, hey, you're not going to put your cherry tree there.
Right.
Right. I think maps, accurate maps, is a key to communicating. And I think getting those maps is going to have to be market driven, where an excavator maybe starts mapping all of his jobs after he's done, and then giving that to the people, and all of a sudden he gets more jobs because he's providing a value
add.
to the system, and then that operator says, well, that engineering firm that I hired, who hired that excavator, now I'm going to hire them again, and it starts with that. And if you put some things in place as far as what we're communicating, I think this could grow very quickly, but I think it's going to be a market application.
There's a little bit of overlap, right? We're going to still be painting for a few years here, I believe, while we start collecting all the GPS for all the time.
I'll be on the beach when they stop.
Yeah, that's great. I'm jealous. But it's kind of like similar to like pole maintenance. I don't know if you've ever seen pole maintenance devices. It's like they used to have a guy manually go out and like knock on the pole, but now they have the devices that they check the density and like how hard and firm it is, and then it'll just push that data right back, right? And I think we're in a similar thing here with these wands. Every wand's trying to have, it's got to have the GPS in there. We used to have the receiver out here. They're trying to put it inside. It gets a little bit easier so that we can have our locators, when they're going out there, have a kind of period in time where when they're locating, they're mapping, and then they paint still. And then at some point, a couple of years from now, maybe we can hold off on the paint for a tier of certain excavator types. Right? Say, hey, I have approved. Maybe we have an agreement there between an excavator and stuff where I can send you stuff and you can take a little bit more risk, but it's documented, because there's still a big liability game in here where people are, the paint's right there. I got a measuring tape over here. And it serves another purpose that we're not thinking about either. It's like the liability and the actual right then and there. So there's a lot of stakeholders and a lot of puzzles out here. So I think we're paying for 2 to 3 more years. For sure.
There's a lot of problems, a survey firm would say you don't put a GNSS
Yes.
receiver in a locator's hand.
Right.
And then you say, well, why don't you guys go out and do the locate? And they you say, well, we don't locate.
Yeah, that's right.
We
Oh, no,
don't have the resources.
Okay.
Being really
We don't have the
accurate,
resources.
and
No.
that's it, right? So, I mean, there's a multitude of problems that would have to be sort of fixed. But, especially like in California where you are, there's regulations like no one can touch anything but a surveyor, right? And produce that kind of data.
Yeah, they're very protective.
Yeah, and then if you're using GPR, there was
Yeah.
a thing with geophysicists.
That's
you gotta be
died down a bit, but
geophysicist,
yeah.
So there's a lot of problems, and technology will have to overcome all that and make it super simple. Then it'll just have to be obvious, like, oh, we should be doing this instead of putting paint on the ground.
It is changing. A colleague of mine in California pointed out the fact that there are a lot of new businesses within the industry that are new business names, and they're all about locating
Well, like,
and mapping. And
I put
you can't use the word surveyor, but
I know. I put out private locator versus SUE, and it generates lots. It might have been one of our busiest ones ever. So it's a hot topic right now. And someone actually got a call from like the president of engineering association, and they said even the term stamped. Like, is it just a stamp, or is it like in that some people are getting around? Well, it's stamped. I got a stamp.
yeah.
And the lingo says stamp. So
I've talked to locating companies where it's, well, we have one of those on staff, and it's like, well, but he's not doing the work. Well, but
Right.
he's there.
Yeah.
You know, we got it covered.
Yeah, and the Sioux companies, they do not like that at all.
No,
You know, if they're
because
going
they go through a process.
they go through a process. They have a workflow that they're following out in
Yeah.
the field, and that PE is, you know, associated with every step of that process, right?
Yeah.
What's weird is that they'll actually go out and they'll do a lot of non-Sioux utility mapping.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big part of their business too. So it's kind of like, will the public pay for this or will the public pay for that? So it's a real nebulous sort of world out there, and everybody's kind of doing it. And what makes a mapper? What makes a utility locator a mapper, right? And should he be doing mapping? Should he even say the word mapping, right? Yeah.
But
So
we didn't have this conversation 2 years ago.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So they're like, sometimes it's really hard to kind of know, like get little indicators about where we're going and how we're doing right now. But sometimes just like a general conversation, like right now, hey, we've never talked about that, you know, beyond this last year. And so that just our conversations we're having is showing how our mindsets are moving on a little bit. And it's a little technology here. This is a big team effort, all these stakeholders, right? It's might be the biggest around, where it's a big puzzle. You get a lot of different people. We want everyone to bring the floor up and keep proving, because there are some people that are leading the charge too, doing a lot of data collection, and, you know, just because they already know it's valuable. And I think that's sometimes the problem, is people don't understand how valuable this data actually is, and they need to get it every time.
So, talking about how valuable the data is there a mindset in this industry of too much of a one size fits all, and that the only valid way to acquire information about what's underground in the dig area is to send a locator out, where in some cases where if I could get 95% of the answer immediately, that's more valuable than 99.9% of the answer in 2 weeks. So if I'm, for example, if I'm burying some pipes on the east side of the street, I just need to know if there's anything on the east side of the street, right? And if you show me everything's on the west side, that's good enough for just a design. So is there too much one size fits all, as opposed to recognizing that sometimes like
See,
an
that's the
immediate,
mentality we have to move away from. Right. Right. You know, if we were making cars and we said, well, yeah, it goes down the road and you can corner with it and everything else, but there's no seat belts or anything like that, but it's way cheaper, right? People would buy that car if they just want to go down the road and turn, right? You know, there's no reverse in it. You just have to go all the way around, you know, whatever. But, you know, we have to get away from the mentality of, I just want to spend this much because the data is important, right?
Well, like everything, you know, every locate is its own case by case, I would say. Like there's never one really the same. And what happens is when you have that, right, you don't have common denominators across all your locates. You have similarities. So it's really hard to take those blanket kind of things, right? And that's where the data and AI can help provide you insights. A couple times I've gone to read like our Google chat, and it's got the summary up above, and it just gives me the summary. It saves me all the time from reading all the conversation that happened. And as I've been doing it now, I'm just naturally trusting it. At first I was like, let me double check if that's what they talked about. Shit, it did pretty good, right? And I think as we look at these case by, you know, they're all case by case, and the data and the AI is going to help us build that confidence in we're working in these new environments, right? Because we're treating everyone like it's a little bit newer than anything there, right, before. But there's so much information about what's happened in that spot before that we can pull on and then get that confidence level. Am I gabbling? Because private utilities is this whole thing too, right? Where you might have to go knock on some doors even if you're doing some stuff out there. There's a lot of different ways to kind of grab that data.
talking about AI, Shane, you brought up AI. Do we use, and tying it in with data analytics, do we use real AI in this industry enough? Do you have any real world examples of where we use AI to improve damage prevention results or response times to requests for information, anything like that?
It's definitely, you know, there's a couple spots it's used in a lot of the risk scoring, and there's some different types of AI. So it's a lot of evolutionary, like kind of algorithms that kind of keep changing, and they need to keep evolving because, like I said, we didn't have this conversation years ago. Things change, and when your algorithms, they're not blanketed out, they're fixed. They're always kind of growing and evolving. So I think some of the risk scoring stuff is there. We use AI in some of the programming to build the code base and to speed up the programmers to build those features out for people to get those new technologies out there and stuff. But on a general basis, I think there's maybe some imagery stuff, but it's not really wholly adopted where it's leading the charge. It's right now just like a little side piece that's telling you some additional information. And it still needs good vehicles to drive.
I think in data collection, AI can be, well, not the help in that regard yet, but that if you're looking at, a set of data, let's say it's a parking lot and you go through there and the guy comes in and, locates everything out and it's all done, everything's good. And then they come back to that and they locate it again, but all of a sudden the electric line turned into the water line because the guy forgot to, switch his software over while he was collecting data and, he's thinking about something else. And then the AI comes along and goes, well, wait a minute, for 12 locates, the water line was over here and now it's, an electric line. I think that can be very helpful in the future.
Yeah.
I think, if machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, I think we're certainly starting to see that technology permeate, several years back with risk scoring. And then certainly now with, being able to, assumptively place a status on a ticket when it's received by ticket management systems or by the organization. So I think that, certainly there's been a stronger adoption of those technologies. But I think there's certainly an opportunity to go a lot further because the basis of any machine learning and any AI is the data that you provide to those models. And certainly, as we've been discussing here for the last 45 minutes here, is that there's a dearth of data that's generally available across the aggregate industry that we can normalize and create better models for. But I think artificial intelligence can go a long way with helping organizations to offset some of the impacts of increased ticket flow, to be able to assist locators with summary of the tickets. As you pointed out, you look in your Google chat, it gives you a summary, right? Well, how can we provide that to the locator to help them expedite the locate process, right? How we can take those remarks that the excavator has placed in that ticket and provide a better summary to the locator. How can, when they're completing that ticket, how can we use artificial intelligence for them to be able to put information about what they found, when they found it, and any additional notes in an expedited way to better streamline the locate process. So. Again, this comes down to training those models and the data that's needed to train those models to make it accurate. It goes back to the core of our discussion here, where we have to find ways in which we can normalize that data, create these better models, and then really use those models to address the critical, critical bottlenecks that exist within this industry around locating.
Yeah, and our industry is really ripe for it too. Because like Jemmy's mentioned a couple of times, or do we need it to be perfect? That's what's beautiful about AI is that the data and everything there doesn't need to be perfect. What it has, you just feed it more and more and it'll tell you, I'm ignoring that, or this is really critical. And as we look at the map data that we have, right, we think about, I have a big polygon and, I look at a map and I just see lines. But we talk about, you might have all the attributes behind there. You could have, thousands of data points in one little dig area in a map. And there's no way I'm going to spend, I can go and look through it, but I'm losing time digging into that. And I don't even know if I'll be worthwhile. So just like the summary on Google Chat, something's digging in the map to tell you, hey, there's transite in the area and, you never mark it when you do. Or there's these two things in this area always cause a bad damage down the road. So bringing in your damages, bringing in your audits, feeding in there, improving the communication from our systems. So like my system to your system, APIs. That way they talk, they get logged, they get stamps. And the more that we connect things and keep adding and feeding it with data, the AI is going to be so beneficial, you have no choice. And just like I said before, with like excavators, it's going to come to the excavators there at some point because they're going to be wanting to dig, right? And like at some point, this should be a part of their work order systems that they use because they do use big work order systems now. Right. And they already have to leave their work order system, make human error to come type in here. They say, Sue, in the office, can you make that? And I'm going out here. And that's bad.
Yeah. I mean, that's a
really
huge
bad.
point, right?
So we're ripe and we got to stop that stuff.
And having that data, I think, is going to be beneficial for AI. When the the record is, well, Bob said, you know, back in the 40s, we had it over here, and then we changed the street, and then we did this, and well, Bob retired, and all of a sudden, you know, we don't have a record of that, or it's a very crude record, it's a paper record, or it got lost. But as we, you know, get these things, you know, in the system, then the AI can work
That's
with
the
it.
Bob AI. Right? Hey, Bob's retiring. We need to get him into a computer.
I like what you said, though, this kind of a big, huge melting pot of data, like GPR data, pipe locator data, all together, right, into a map, and then there's a QA/QC that happens in the background. Maybe even looking at my data and interpreting it and doing like a check on that. So if you check all these data points to see if it all makes sense, and it all happens in minutes.
Well, we did this at the Louisville Utility Expo, right? Where we brought in, you know, GeoLantis into our Geo server and my ticket system, and we brought your Screening Eagle with the, you know, the GPR, and now we're showing here's 2 units, bringing in multiple layers, and you know, we brought the Vivax one and stuff in there, and it's like I don't know what it's all going to be, but I need it to all be accessible.
Yeah.
Right? Because maybe I get SUE work and I want to feed that. SUE work might want to feed in stuff we do in the locates. Not just a CAD file. Give me a little like temporary layer over my GIS of what our design plans are.
Right.
And then you know if something's going in there. Give me a GIS record of when we just built something and it's actually finished.
We just did a mock strike event up in Northern California, and one of the parts of it where you had to go to different stations and learn about how to do this within the one call, how to locate a line or know, you know, just little things that kind of give people a taste. And one of them was a table where you'd have to go to 2 different stations. Now you're working as a team, so you have to go to this station and read the ticket, and then you have to pick the correct, you know, they have a little map and show you where everything is. And on the first one, my team got it wrong because reading that description, it was like, wow, what?
Right.
Corner of West Main and, you know, across from the this, and we got it wrong. And that's, you know, it was 3
That's a great
people in the
example.
team. So it's like, we got the other one right. But if there was an AI to help with those types
Yeah.
of things, speed and expedite, I think that's very helpful.
And on that note, we're running out of time. We're out of time. Can we have a hand for the fine panelists here? So it sounds like we all agree that we should collect more data so we could expedite AI taking over the world.
Skynet.
Yes, for everyone on the live stream and in audience here, our next session's at 4 p.m. today, Pacific time. So see you all back here then. Thank you.